All right, web design friends, let's talk about dealing with images. Now, most of you probably get a lot of your images from Google Images, but you'll notice in Lesson 7 that we talk about various types of images. So let's say I'm searching for a pig, for example, and we get lots of different pigs. When you're in Google, you can see the size, the dimensions of the picture when you mouse over the picture. Now this picture here is 2040 pixels by 1357. That's a pretty big picture. Now I have an extension, a Chrome extension that automatically, when I click on it, takes my picture full screen, the actual size that it is. Yours probably doesn't do that. Yours is going to open up and it's going to be in a little window. So that is this. It's called it bypasses Google image previews. So if I turn this off, let me turn off my little sumo wrestler dude, and then I click on one of these, see, it opens like this. And that's probably what yours do. Well, I really like this Google extension, Google Images bypass. So then I can actually see how big it is. I can also see whether or not our school firewall is blocking the image or not, because sometimes you can't quite tell if it's blocking or not till you click on it and then you download a really bad blurry view. So here you can kind of tell. When you right click and save the image, it's going to save in some sort of format. You can see here this one actually saves in JPEG format, JPEG, and generally speaking we use JPG. You can rename a JPEG to JPG. But there are certain formats that you can't rename. So, for instance, this one is already a JPEG in proper format, so we're good to go on that one. But there are other formats as well. Let me go ahead and click on Tools. If I go here to Type, you can also switch to Animated if you're looking for little GIF animations. Now, you won't see yours animate. I see mine animate because, once again, I have Google GIFs turned on, which is another Chrome extension, which lets me see them animate. You can't see yours animate till you click on it and it opens in the little window, and then you can see. So, again, another good Chrome extension here is Google GIFs. And then, of course, when I click on it, it will take me to that picture opened up on its own. And when they're on Giphy, it tends to bring me to the actual page, and then I have to download it from there. So it's a little bit complicated sometimes when you're trying to download images from the internet, and you do have to make sure they save properly. So if I know it is an animation, like I know this is an animation, then I know that when this saves, it's going to have to be a GIF, because a GIF is the only format that's going to be animated other than video formats. Okay, so you can rename whatever you want, the main file name, but you cannot change the .gif part because that's part of that image. Okay, GIFs can have transparency. PNGs, though, are the main type that have transparency. So if I go back to Tools, I turned off Animation, and under Color, I chose Transparent. This is going to give me more things like icons or animals that are taken off the background. So like this pig clip art, if I click on it, notice it is a transparent background. If I right click to save this image, it is a PNG. PNGs can have transparency, so can GIFs, but PNGs have better quality. They have better image quality, more colors. Okay, so that is kind of how you can tell the difference. Now when you're in your folder, and I've got a little piggy folder here with some various things, if you've got files downloaded to your computer, you can go to Details, and you can add over here, well, you can see under Type what they are, but you can also right click over here and go to More and Dimensions, and that will show you how big your pictures are. Sometimes there's no way around it, you're going to have to resize your pictures. You know, this Pig 6 is 1000 by 685 pixels. That's just going to be way too big for my document, and I know that going in. So you kind of have to plan a little bit. If you're going to use images on a website, you want to plan. First off, you want to make an images folder and put the pictures in it, or it could be called something else, but most commonly people call the folder images, because that makes sense. And then you can go from there. So if I'm using this, so let me go ahead and create a new file here on REPL, and I need an HTML file. I'll call this Teach 7 because we're in Unit 7 at this point. So once I get this created in here, and again, I'm going to delete this script file because I don't need it, and unlink this. Once I'm in here, I can now create a folder. So I can say Add Folder and call it Images or whatever. Again, we want to stick with lowercase. With images, you also want to make sure they are lowercase. You want to make sure your images don't have space bars, and I would avoid really long names too. So in here, let's say that I know I'm going to use, let's see, I need this little icon, so I'll drag it into the images folder. And let's say I need a background. Now, if you can't see these, you can go to icons and you can actually see what they look like. So here's a background, this pink background, so I'll put that in there. And then I'll just grab a pig and we'll put this little pig in here. So now I've got 3 images that I can use on my website. Okay. We've talked about a little bit about styling things, but now we're going to talk about how do we style images for a background of a page. So that is going to be, we're styling the entire body if we're styling the background. It's background-image. And then you have to put URL, and it's weird, it's just the way it is. So it's URL and then there's parentheses. Notice it pops up in here. If I press tab, it puts me inside the parentheses, and then I have to path to the image. So images / and then the name of that image, which is pinkbg.jpg. And then of course I'll put my semicolon at the end of this line here. When I run, I should then end up with a pink background, which I did. So that's good. We got a pink background on there. And so that's one of those things. Now to insert an image on the actual page, we have to put it on the page itself. So I've got my pig page here. And then I'm going to insert my image. Now an image is an inline element, which means it treats it like it's a letter in a paragraph, for example. So if you want it to be like on its own, standing on its own, you kind of have to put it inside a paragraph. So here is my paragraph, and then here is going to be my image. The image tag is IMG. It does not have a closing tag, so you don't have anything to put at the end of this. However, you do have to have an attribute to tell you where the image is at, and that's called the source attribute, SRC. And be careful because students tend to type SCR a lot. SRC is for source. And then again, you put in the path to the image. So it's in my folder, images, and then pig1.png. The other attribute they suggest that you always use with an image is called a text alternative, or alt. The alt attribute is what shows up if your link is broken to your image, or for screen reader. So it's an accessibility thing. Like if someone who has poor vision is using a screen reader to browse your website, it's going to read the text alternative. So I'm just going to put pig clip art here. And so this is going to put my pig on here. I'm going to hit run. We should now end up with our pig. So there's my pig on my pig page. Happy little pig. And if I put words, this is a happy little pig. In this paragraph with this image, the words are going to go right next to it. So it's as if this is like the letter in front of the T. Okay, that's kind of how that works. If I have a bunch of words, like in a paragraph proper, so let me paste a bunch of words in here. So now we have a bunch of words in our paragraph. So again, it's like he is a big letter that takes up that space, but the words are going to start beside him and then go below him. And that is just the way that images insert. They insert in line. So we can style an image so that it floats, is what we call it, which is kind of the equivalent of word wrap. So style equals float, and then you have to decide which way should the piggy float, to the left or to the right. And so I'll put float right in here and run. And now my piggy goes over here and the words go beside the pig. So that is the basic process for inserting an image. And that's from lesson 7. Now it gets a little more in detail with it. For instance, you could say, you could modify your pig to be, to have a width. So let's say I say width 100%. Okay. So when I do that, my pig takes up 100% of the view of the page. So if I should make it smaller, it gets bigger and smaller like so. So that's definitely not what you're going to want to do when you have a little pig in there. when you have another option here called max width, it's kind of weird because they're very confusing. Max width applies it to just the pig. So the pig can never be bigger than 100% of the actual size the pig is. But if I get smaller, he scales down automatically. Isn't that fun? So probably it makes sense to use a max width on your images, but you definitely don't want to set a width on your images because then they're going to stretch all the way across, and then, in his case, he got all blurry because he wasn't that big to begin with. Okay, so that's one example. Now I'm going to steal this little code here again and put this pig on the page one more time. So I'm going to put him in a paragraph. But this time I'm going to use him, actually I won't put him in a paragraph. This time I'm going to use him in what's called a figure tag. So you still use your image tag like normal. So I still have this image tag with the source and the text alternative. But inside the figure tag, we use what's called a Figcaption, which is how we put a word that stays with the picture. So it's Figcaption, picture of a piggy, and then turn it off. And that's going to put the words underneath the little pig. And so it's like a caption below the pig. All of this inside the figure tag. So if you want to have words that are styled in there, you can do that. I can go in here and say, I want Figcaption to be set to, a font size of 8 pixels. Oh, that's really tiny. How about 8 points? That will be not quite as tiny. And then you can style that, but it will stick with the pig. That's how a Figcaption is. There is another one called Picture, which only really works if you have multiple versions of your pig. And I don't have multiple versions of my pig to demonstrate that one here. But the picture tag is put in like this. It's picture. And then it uses a source tag. And so you would say source media, this is a media query, equals. And then you would say, as long as my screen is not bigger than some number, so, 800 pixels. So as long as my screen is not bigger than 800 pixels, and this goes in parentheses. As long as my screen is not bigger than 800 pixels, we're going to use source set. We're going to use this image. So say we have a smaller image. We would put that in there. And then if we get bigger than that max width, then it just uses the normal one. So you would just put this tag in again. So it would use this one. And you could, of course, set it so that it automatically fits to the viewfinder. So you could say width auto, style equals. So that it automatically fits. But that's just an alternative way to put in a picture if you have multiple pictures. So, if somebody was on their phone and they were on a small view, you might want to use a little picture. But if they were on a huge computer screen, you might want to use a big picture. So you could have this little small image that's a fallback if they're on a small screen, and so forth. I could do an example with my little icon. It's just so little, but it's fine. Let's do it. I'll use my pig icon. .png just to illustrate. So let's say this is what it uses if it's 400 pixels or less. Otherwise, then it's going to go to this bigger one. So I'm going to run it. And then if I get this small enough, it switches to, I didn't put this in here properly, images. Okay. So then notice, and see my text alternative showed up. So we're a big pig until we get down to the below that 400, and then we turn into a little pig. Okay, so that's how that picture one works. Okay, now finally, the last one listed on here has to do with lists. So if we had a list in here, so just your standard UL, and then some LIs. I'm just going to put the word pig over and over again just to save time, so I'll copy paste. But instead of having our standard run-of-the-mill black bullets, let's say we want to have little pig icons instead. So we can style the UL. I'm going to pop out to my styles and do it from here. And that's going to be list, style, image. And just like the background image, you have to put the URL in the parentheses. So URL and then inside the parentheses, remember to point into the folder. So images/pigicon.png. And you want to make sure your icons are little. If you like Google search for icons, you can see that. If you Google search for icons, sometimes they bring up icons that really are, I wouldn't call them icons because they're not small enough. This pig icon is 20 by 20 pixels. So sometimes if you search for icons, they'll be like 125 or 100. That's honestly way too big. And if you use something that's too big, it's really going to mess up the way this looks over here. Let me go ahead and use our pig again, but I'll use him as our icon. And then notice what happens. See, there's the pig, and he hangs off the page because he's too big to fit in this little margin space that's provided with a UL. So you do have to be super careful about making sure that you have things that are the proper size. So let's say, what if you do find a picture you want to use and it's just not the right size? Well, you can use online photo editors if you haven't taken Photoshop. Pixlr Editor or Pixlr X, either of those are fine. Now, if you're creating artwork, say you want to create a heading banner, like something to go at the top of your page, like I have all these different things, then you could use Canva, which is free, and you can log in with Google to use. Or, like I said, Pixlr, and there's Pixlr Editor, which is kind of the more detailed version. If you've had Photoshop, you'll like it better. But Pixlr X, you can just open the image, so I can go find my pig picture, wherever that is, piggy. And so I'll just take, I don't know what any of these are. Let's turn on I can't turn on my view in here. Let's see, here we go. Okay, so here's a little clip art. So there's my pig, it's too big. So in here I can resize. So this little button here will let you resize the image. And then you can choose, instead of it being 75 or whatever, then I could set like the biggest size to 25 or the smallest size to 25 or whatever, and then hit apply. And then now it's going to be little. I can then save it, put it in my folder. I'll call it Little Pig, PNG if you want to keep your transparent background. That's important. And then you download it. You're going to want to put it, if you were using a computer, you would put it in the same folder as your other ones. If you were using any kind of online depository like Replit or Thimble or something, then you're going to have to move it eventually into that folder anyway. So I'm going to put it in here, Little Pig, but then I've got to put Little Pig in here, right? So I'm going to go hit this button and show it, so I can drag it in there. It's over here on my other screen, so you can't see it. And then Little Pig can come in. Okay, and now I actually have a small pig, and in here you can click on these to see what size they are, but you can see that I do have my little pig here. Okay, so that's important to know. You do need to know how to do some basic editing. You also need to know how to do some basic cropping. So if I'm in here, let's say I've got this roller coaster image, but let's say I don't need it to be big. This is rather big. If you click on here and you click resize image, you'll see this is 1920 by 1200, way too big. Let's say I was doing a website where I had multiple roller coasters. I wanted them all to be squares. I wanted them all to be 500 pixel squares. Well, so you could crop. And if I know I want them to be squares, I might go ahead right now and set this to 500 by 500. And then I can choose what part of the image I want. And so then I could apply that crop and then save this image and use it on my page. Or you can go ahead and resize the image first if you know that you want a bigger part of the image. So if I know I want it, I'm going to go 500 wide. Let's say I'm going to go ahead and set this to 500. Well, I need to set my smaller size to 500, and then I would hit apply, and now I can actually crop it 500 by 500, and then I'm using the height of the actual image, and then I'm just choosing what part I want, and apply the crop, and save to download. So that's the basics. I mean, you need to be aware when you're dealing with graphics and web design with how to change the size of things. There are some things that you go out and read, and they'll tell you to add widths and heights to your pictures, but it's not advised to do that, so you should probably try not to add widths and heights unless it's the actual width and height they are. But don't use widths and heights to resize things. Okay, although this doesn't really have to do with graphics, it's still in this unit here. So if we have an ordered list, or or an unordered list, but I'm going to do an ordered list first. You can change the bullets that you see. So the standard bullets on a UL, an unordered list, are disk, which are filled in circles. That's the default. So right now I have my piggy bullets going on here. So let's get rid of this so we can just see the normal bullets. So you can see here I have my little black filled in bullets. Again, that's called disc, D-I-S-C, like a Frisbee. And then your normal default ordered bullets are numbers, and they actually call these decimals because it's 1 decimal, 2 decimal, so forth. So you can change these by styling, and again, you can do it in the CSS or you can do it in here. For the purposes right now, I'm just going to style it in here. So it's list style, and instead of image, it's list style type. So disk is going to be the default, but there is one called, say, circle. Circle are hollow circles. So when we put that in here, we end up with hollow circles. Or I can go in here, style equals list style type, colon. And then for an ordered list, you have lots of other options. Upper alpha, which would be capital letters. Lower alpha, upper Roman numerals, lower Roman numerals. So you've got all those different options too. And you can see here, upper alpha is pretty common. So that's one there too. You can also use an attribute called start, and you can give a start value. So if I say start with 5, for instance, it's going to start with E, because E is the 5th letter of the alphabet. Or if I'm starting with upper Roman numerals, instead of starting with Roman numeral number 1, it's going to start with Roman numeral number 5. So you can set the starting value of your list as well using start. And so that's yet another option here. So we can make our bullets pictures, we can change the list style types to circle, we can change them to square. There's not a whole lot of options other than the disc, circle, and square, to be honest, without actually putting pictures in there. But in a nutshell, that's kind of the basics for dealing with images. Now, if you have a picture image, we'll go one more here. Let me get another picture that we can drag in. So we'll say, let's go back in here and look at the details so we get one that's not too humongous. Pig 2 looks good. Okay, I could change my view and pay attention to what I'm doing. Okay, Pig 2, this guy here. So we're going to drag him into the images folder. So we've got Pig 2 in there. We'll add him in between these lists. So I'll put him in a paragraph. Again, it's IMG space SRC for source. The folder path, so images slash, or whatever you called yours, pig2.jpg. Alt is the text alternative, what screen readers will read. Ugly pig, or whatever. Ugly pig photo. Okay, and remember there is no closing tag for an image, so you just leave it out there. We call that an empty tag. So we've got this in here. If I hit run, it's going to put my picture in there. There are some additional things towards the end of this chapter on styling images that you can do to your images. So let me go in and create a class, since we did classes most recently. Pig fun, we'll call this. So I'll add some things to this. So border radius is 1. Good if I could type in there. And you can give a percentage. You can also do pixels. Now, I haven't applied this class to this pig yet, so let me go in here to this image. Class equals pig fun. I think that's what I called it. So when I hit run here, notice that's going to give us a border radius, which rounds the image. So that's one of them. And another thing that you can do is you can add a border around the image. Now that's going to be a little weird here in a minute, but let's say, so 2 pixel, black, solid border, and they have 3 parts to them, and we've gone through this before. This is the size of the border, the color of the border, and the style of the border. So as we go around here, you can see right there along the edge is that nice little black border on there. And then finally, you can add some other things too, like you can put padding around pictures if it's like running into your paragraph and stuff like that. But finally, we get into filter. And filter, you can add a bunch of different filters. They're in your chapter. You can see them pop up on here. You can add drop shadows. Now, each of these work a little bit different. So you can go to W3 Schools if you're never sure about, which ones to use. So for the filter property, for example, you can come down here and see blur, for instance, uses a pixel value, brightness a percentage, contrast a percentage. Drop shadow is a funky one because you have to give it pixels to the left, to the right, to the bottom, and what color. Actually, one of these is the blur value. I think this is the blur value. So this is to the right, this is down, this is the blur value, and this is the color. So as you're putting these in here, you kind of have to look up if you're not familiar with how to use each one. So I could say 5 pixels, that's over and down, 5 pixels, a blur of however much, and then, say red, for instance, if that's the color that I want to use. When we run that, then our little picture is going to have that nice red glowy shadow there, or you can switch the color. Again, there's lots of different filters that you can use. The example in the book we use is grayscale. And again, grayscale, 0 is the default, and 100% will make it completely gray. So this one kind of works on a 0 to 100 scale. There's rotation. You can apply a rotation. And you can put more than one filter. You can just space bar between them like this. So I could say hue, rotate. This is going to be weird because it's going to have a color. I don't know if this is going to look right, but so you can put a certain number of degrees around it. So I can say hue, rotate 90 degrees, and it rotates the hue. So this isn't rotating the picture. This is rotating the hue of the picture, like on the color wheel, I guess you would say. Oh, I've got grayscale on there, so that's not even going to make any sense. Anyway, see, the colors are weird. So it rotates the hue. So these filters have to do pretty much with pixels and colors. But that's one of the examples. Blur, and blur has a pixel value. So if I say a 5 pixel blur, then you're going to get something like this. So anyway, have fun messing around with those various ones. And when in doubt, hit that W3 Schools. Have fun playing with images.